Hey guys, I'm Lee Taylor. That's the brand new Hyundai Palisade, and this is a Right Lane review. So for a while, Hyundai didn't have a flagship SUV. We've had the Santa Fe and the Tucson, and they're both really good SUVs, particularly in the segments, but no heavy hitter. So most people think big three-row SUV, particularly here in Australia, the first thing that comes to mind is something like the Toyota Land Cruiser, maybe the Ford Everest or Volkswagen Touareg. But Hyundai has decided to enter the market with a brand new flagship SUV, the brand new Palisade. So in order to hit that sweet spot, Hyundai needs to make a 7 or 8 seat SUV with rugged good looks, plenty of features, and a decent price point. And at $75,000, the Palisade is aiming to do just that. So how is the Palisade to drive? Well, it's actually a lovely SUV. I'm not going to call it little because it's quite large. I mean, this is a big car. And it's quite easy to park despite being a big car thanks to great parking tech, and Hyundai does safety and parking tech well. I mean, you have forward collision warning, rear collision warning, intersection collision warning, blind spot monitors, blind spot cameras, all the stuff that you expect out of Hyundai Safety Sense. Not to mention you have park sensors front and rear, as well as a 360 camera around the car, which is nice. I do wish that it had park assist. That's not something you can get on this particular car, just because a lot of its competitors have it. And this car is really designed to be a big SUV for families who are, going cross country or taking the school run or going to practice or that sort of thing. So it's not supposed to be overly sporty or overly rugged. I mean, you have different drive modes. You have Comfort, Eco, Sport, and Smart. And Comfort's normal, waft along, no big deal. Eco for the more fuel conscious, and Sport if you want a bit more response of the 2.2 liter diesel and the 8-speed gearbox. And the 2.2 liter diesel isn't too terribly bad. I would call it adequate. So it's 140 kilowatts, maybe a little bit more, and about 400 newton meters of torque. So it has plenty of punch, and you can tow 2.2 tons with it, but it's not what I would call lightning fast, and it's not a torque monster, so it feels okay for its size. I mean, it feels better than the Pathfinder. You can get this car in a 3.8 liter V6, but it's only front wheel drive. So if you want the all-wheel drive, you have to get the diesel. With the Smart drive mode, I find it to not be that smart. The idea of it is that it's going to select the mode that it thinks you want. So it's going to give you, Comfort or Eco or Sport, depending on the scenario that it's dealing with. And I just don't find it that intuitive. Sometimes it gives you Eco when you want a bit sporty or response. Sometimes it, gives you a really harsh gear change when you don't necessarily need it. It's one of those things where I'm not overly convinced it's a good idea. But you do have some terrain modes. You have mud, snow, sand, and based on the Hytrack all-wheel drive system, which is basically a front-wheel drive based all-wheel drive system, and Hyundai's background, it's probably perfectly fine for light use, but I wouldn't want to use it in anything heavy. I mean, again, this car is not designed to be a heavy trail runner. If you want something like that, get a Land Cruiser or an Everest. I would happily take this car cross country, spend some time in it. It's comfortable in the hands. It's easy to maneuver considering its size. It's a great place to be, and overall, I think it's a pretty good car. And at $75,000 before on roads, it's a pretty good value proposition too. I mean, there's not many cars this size that are around the same price. I mean, you're looking at the Pathfinder, which I'm just not a fan of, the Everest, the Fortuna, but those are based on utility vehicles. If you want something premium with a bit more premium feel, you're probably gonna have to go Touareg. So this is kind of like a happy medium ground, or like a sweet spot that Hyundai is really trying to get into with this flagship SUV, and I think they're doing a pretty good job. So dynamically, it feels pretty good. I mean, it's not a sports car by any means. I mean, it's too big to be a sports SUV, even though there's going to be an inline version at some point, which I'm quite curious to see how that's going to turn out. And it feels fine in the hands, it's placeable, it's easy to drive. I wouldn't call it athletic, but it's adequate, and it feels confident, and that's the main thing, particularly in a family car. You want to feel safe and confident in it, and the Palisade feels just that. And for a big SUV, it's all right. I wouldn't take it up to the hills. I definitely wouldn't throw it down into any corners, but it's a great place to be in, and I'd easily be here for hours on end. So how's life in the Catman chair of the Palisade? Well, you actually sit in really lovely Nappa leather seats that are heated and cooled. You have a heated steering wheel, and the steering wheel actually quite light compared to the other crab-looking design of the Hyundais. You have a blended digital and analog dash right in front of you, which is a nice touch, along with your blind spot monitor that's put in the middle of the dash, a full heads-up display with all the needed data that you need, Throughout the cabin, the design's actually really, really lovely. I probably wouldn't have it in white, but I like the wood veneer effect. I'm not a fan of this plasticky material in the middle, nor the headliner, which I'll talk about a bit more in a minute. But as far as layout, everything's really good in hand. Everything's where it's supposed to be. The buttons are nice and big, so you can't miss them. Apple CarPlay, wireless Android Auto, 2 sunroofs, a nice wide-angle mirror to keep an eye on your drunk friends or kitties. As far as storage is concerned, you have tons of space. I mean, bins everywhere, a nice big center console that's got multiple cup holders. I mean, 14 cup holders. 14 cup holders. Wireless charger is in there as well, plus a massive bin in the middle, and this floating dash means you get a nice big space underneath as well for more storage. So how's life in the back of the Palisade? Well, it's actually incredibly comfortable. You sit in these beautiful, nice leather seats, and the outboard seats are actually heated. You have your own zone of climate. There's tons of space, legroom, headroom. It's very bright, thanks to a nice secondary sunroof, even though it doesn't open. As usual, we have tons of cup holders, a nice big pocket in front as well, USB points on the back of the seats for any devices, a nice big armrest in the middle. Your seats are completely adjustable, forward, back, and rake, so no matter what you do, you're gonna get comfortable. If you see peasants around, you have a sunshade. My only problem though is the fact that the headlining is white and it's made of this suede material, so every time you touch it, it just makes marks. Not good. So how's life in the backpack? Well, not too bad actually. I have a pretty good amount of knee room and headroom, even though I am shrunk down a bit. Would I put 3 adults back here? Probably not, but 3 kids would be perfectly fine. 2 adults would be okay for a decent sized trip, and you actually still have enough room in front of you for more people. Now this is the 8-seat model, so we're 3 abreast in the second row and 3 abreast in the third row. In the third row, you actually have quite a few amenities. You still have your aircon, a couple of USB points, and 2 more cup holders on each side. And these seats are completely adjustable on your rake, so you can actually get nice and comfortable for a good trip. So how's the boot in the Palisade? Well, you have plenty of space in a typical family car, and you even get an automatic door. So you actually have plenty of space in the back, even with the third row seats up. Now if you flip those down, it becomes a very cavernous boot. And there's some buttons here you can press to get the second row to fold down flat for trips to Bunnings, some camping trips, or maybe even runs up to IKEA. Underneath the load floor isn't much space, but a little bit of storage where the tools are, as well as the partial shelf cover, and the full-size spares attached to the bottom of the car. So what's my tops, bottoms, and final verdict on the brand new Hyundai Palisade? Well, a few things that are just, quite frankly, personal preferences. One is it's quite large, so if you live in an urban environment, it might not park everywhere that you want it to or fit in every garage, so keep that in mind. The materials on the inside are okay for the most part. There's a few that I don't care for, like the veneer in the middle and the headlining, which is just a no. And it could do with a little bit more pizzazz. It's a bit dull. So what's to like for the big Palisade? Well, as a flagship SUV, it's packed full of great tech. If you're looking people around on a regular basis, there's plenty of practicality and plenty of space for anything you can possibly think of. And it's just a really good value point for the price. So what's my final verdict on the 2021 Hyundai Palisade? Well, as a family float, I think it offers a great package at a pretty good deal. And as a flagship SUV for Hyundai, I think it hits most of its marks. So if you're after a big 3-row machine, check it out. So if you're after a 3-row SUV that's friends and family friendly, give it a look. And I repeated myself again. I'm gonna redo that whole thing because it was